Hello, and we are Team Skynet, representing Illinois State University's COM 223 class. I am Rachel Schifano, and this is
David Johnson.
Travis Souter.
Kevin Castor.
Nathan King.
Tyler Haas.
And Dave Romanowskis.
As it turns out, our project for this semester was not to be a menacing, scary web intelligence like Skynet. Actually, what we did this semester was we coordinated and helped create labs for a conference called Millennium Girls, which was co-sponsored by Illinois State University and State Farm. So this semester, when we were coming up with our project, we reached out to the State Farm Millennium Girls coordinators, and since we all had backgrounds in IT, decided it would be a good job to help. So for our proposal, they suggested that perhaps we would either come up with one full lab idea, which would include all the materials needed, or we would come up with 4 different ideas, but not actually create the materials along with them. But for this semester, for our proposal, we went above and beyond. And originally we went for 2 full labs to create, to actually making 3 full labs. And that included word tracks, handouts, the instruction PowerPoints, and the presentation PowerPoints. And we gave a final presentation on November 5th that actually overviewed everything that we did. So to give you a rough guideline, in order to follow the things that we were doing and stay in line with the actual teaching and helping the little girls, we followed education guidelines, such as the Khan Academy principles for teaching computer science. We also looked at an education major, looked at our material to ensure that it had quality. We reviewed it with the committee, and we also surveyed 200 girls at the conference to get an idea of what to do. As for the rough kind of guidelines that we followed for our proposal as well, we kind of, in general, looked to try and complete, 2 different labs originally, but then 3 labs. But then we broke down a bunch of ideas, and for the first week, we kind of brainstormed to put things together. By mid-October, we decided that we would have a skeleton working of all the different labs. And by the end of October, we were able to come up with the actual full labs for the conference. And here is Travis, who's going to elaborate on the Millennium Girls Conference itself.
Thank you, Rachel. So the Millennium Girls Conference is held once a year for girls age 5th to 8th grade, and its purpose is to get them interested in math, science, and tech fields. So it lasts most of the day and is entirely free for the girls. So 4 of us decided that we should attend the lab in order to better understand how it's run and what the labs are set up like. That was Rachel, Dave, Kevin, and myself. During the event, we all participated as lab assistants, so we weren't just watching them, we were actually helping out. And we definitely took away a lot of useful information from this lab, from our experiences. I know, for instance, that my lab that I worked on, the Sugary Sweets lab, we took how the groups were made in one of their labs and incorporated that in ours. Also, during their break time, we set up easels with questions on them that we thought would be helpful in designing our labs. And we got very positive feedback with them, with several pages of answers on each question. So these are pictures from the conference. This is the final event where they were running down. And this is just all of us before it started. Related to the lab, actually. This was the lab I was in, which was Scratch. More of the Scratch lab. Scratch lab was a lab, this is our easels with the question, do you have any experience with computers? If so, what? And the girls all answered a lot. And they also have different booths set up with other various things that the girls can see. One of them was like Google Glass. Next comes David with lab changes that occurred.
Now there are several different lab changes that we had to go throughout the semester of the project, specifically for each of the individual labs, but overall, the changes that we had to make to our project was actually splitting up into 3 different groups. It wasn't originally planned, but once we figured out that, hey, we have 3 different ideas, it'd be better to go ahead and split into 3 different groups to get it done, we decided to do that. And also transforming from formal roles into informal roles based upon each lab everybody was in. Now specifically for the lab that I was a part of, which is Starship in Space, we got feedback from the Millennium Girls that they had wrote on the posters such as questions, and it helped us actually make the lab a lot better. So for example, we found out that the girls liked to actually have things that were bright of colors, something that was cute that they can actually pay attention to and actually be interested into it also. And also the feedback from the sponsors themselves, actually staying tuned into the requirements they require for the Millennium Girls, actually helped us change our project throughout the span. And now next we'll have Lightning Logic, and then there's plan changes.
As far as the hardware of the lab goes, Lightning Logic, there were some very drastic changes. Myself and Kevin both worked on that lab, and we actually completely redesigned the lab midway through. Despite our extensive research into breadboards and projects that can be done with breadboards, we found it to be eventually too complicated for both the girls involved and the people teaching the lab, who more than likely have little to no electronical experience. And so we decided to switch to a more beginner-friendly kit called Snap Circuits. And it's a kit that's actually meant for kids to learn the basics of electricity, so it takes a lot of the frustration out of it. And while maintaining the same principles, it's like I said, it makes things a lot easier. Making these changes, though, not only involved extra work, but it involved a lot of frustration and lost time and efforts. But effectively communicating and managing our time down to the last minute became an absolute key role in making sure that our lab was successful. And next we'll have Tyler with the Sugary Sweets Lab.
As the lead of the Sugary Sweets Lab, I saw a couple changes that occurred throughout the entire project. Originally, the lab was meant to be a physics idea because the other 2 were more technical related. While I wanted to do something explosive, this was against the Millennium Girls rules. So we switched it to a tower building lab to teach gravity. While we had originally planned to have lots of materials for the girls to tinker with, such as rubber bands and paper clips and popsicle sticks, thinking of the girls while we tested the lab, we realized that this was too complex and that some of the younger girls might get frustrated with not being able to build a proper tower. So instead we switched it to a more kid-friendly building lab with just toothpicks and gumdrops, and we thought that the theme change also would really keep the girls interested. As we did these lab changes throughout all 3 labs in the project, there are a couple difficulties, and here to talk about that is Kevin.
Our group had a number of different difficulties, but we were able to overcome all of them. To begin with, we had some informational difficulty with talking with the Millennium Girls coordinators over the specific details that we wanted us to cover. And we saw that by having our liaison, Rachel, stay in constant contact with them, and then she would report back to our meetings and she would ask them our questions. Particularly, this was done in our 9/12 meeting, and that's reflected in the agenda. And it also continued for other meetings, such as the one on 10/24 and 10/29. We also had some external difficulties with simultaneously meeting the needs of Millennium Girls and the communications project requirements. To begin with, our project didn't raise any money. We weren't required to, so we didn't have any treasurers. And also, we didn't have any, because we didn't have treasurers, because we weren't raising money, we didn't have a way to track where we were compared to everyone else via finances either. We solved this by we reassigned people who were treasurers to other roles, such as the 3 labs that they just talked about. And we also had more methods for gaining feedback from, to see where we were in the project, such as the feedback from the Millennium Girls project, the girls who were there, and the feedback from the State Farm representatives after we gave the presentation, both during and afterwards. And methods for getting feedback were discussed at the 9/22 meeting and 9/26. And on an 11/7 meeting, we verified all the feedback that was available, and the webmaster uploaded all the feedback. Also, internal to our group, we had some difficulty maintaining the different labs to the same standard because we were broken up into groups of 2 people, we had to make sure to come together and touch base to make sure we all were aiming towards the same target. And we helped this by having meetings twice a week and by looking at the labs from last year and sort of sharing our experiences, particularly those of us that volunteered at the Millennium Girls event, to sort of get a standard where we should all try and achieve. And now here's Nate with applying group experiences.
Spending an entire semester working on a group project allowed for many opportunities to observe and apply course concepts. So there are many examples to choose from in relating group experiences to the 3 required concepts. One of the first things that we did as a group was assign self-appointed formal roles to everybody, as seen in the September 5th minutes. The text defines formal roles as specific role positions assigned to group members through appointment or election. They are essentially the official roles assigned to each member. The ease at which the group came to a consensus about formal role assignments helped to build my confidence in the group's ability to succeed. This belief in the ability of a group to perform is referred to as group efficacy by the class text and is an important part of group development. The group quickly entered the storming phase of Tuckman's 5-phase model, which is the 3rd course concept that I'll relate group experiences to. After deciding that we'd work with Millennium Girls starting on September 12th, the exact details of what our goals were and how we would go about accomplishing them were still being debated. A small amount of secondary tension arose from this uncertainty about how to best accomplish the task. Everybody in the group acknowledged this uncertainty regarding the direction of the project, which motivated the group to develop a feasible and concrete plan through consensus and compromise. This helped to ease secondary tension and develop cohesion within the group, which is a primary characteristic of the next phase of Tuckman's model, the norming phase. This is apparent in subsequent meeting minutes and agendas, which illustrate improved direction and use of time. Thanks in part to the concepts learned in class, our group was able to achieve success, evident through our accomplishments, which Travis is going to elaborate on.
In fact, I will be talking about the accomplishments. When our group first wrote its charter, we had 1 primary goal and 2 secondary goals. The primary goal was to create 2 working labs that were fully working and we could give to the State Farm panel to use for Millennium Girls next year. Our secondary goals were to have the labs stay to the Khan Coding Academy rules for teaching code to younger children. And these involve things such as keeping the code friendly, keeping it interactive, and also keeping it interesting so the girls would not lose interest. We knew we accomplished this for all of our labs because as we designed them, we kept this in mind constantly. We always talked to each other, keeping the other groups in check. And then we also developed feedback response sheets for the State Farm panel so we can see how they viewed all 3 labs that we were given. This let us know that we achieved our secondary goals for all 3 labs because we not only got the positive feedback from State Farm, but also had an education major review them. And we also made sure that we looked at what the girls wrote at this year's Millennium Girls Conference on the post-it notes to see what they thought of labs and what they should be included with. By doing this, we accomplished our 2 secondary goals, and also our primary goal, we went above and beyond by not only creating 2 working labs, but rather 3. Now we will have David talking about, or Travis, sorry, talking about our relational outcomes.
I would say we had positive relational outcomes. We all got along very well and were able to work together well to accomplish our goals. This allowed us to synergize well, and we were able to work off our own strengths and weaknesses to become more than just individuals and actually do the task better. On top of that, everyone was willing to pull their own weight, and no one really slacked and tried to get out of accomplishments. Next comes David with decision-making process.
Now, we had a few different types of decision-making processes throughout the project this semester. When we first came up with the ideas for the actual project, we all kind of went through the brainstorming decision-making process. We all shouted out ideas. Now, no ideas was taken for granted. They all got written down. And after that, we kind of looked at which ones would be the best. And with all of us having the same kind of technical background, we kind of all lean towards the more technical aspects of the types of ideas that were listed. And from there, you know, conflicts may have arose because we all had our different types of opinions of how we wanted to approach it. Now, with conflict sometimes being a bad thing, in some cases is a good thing, because doing this, we were able to pick out the best ideas and make it a lot more concrete for developing good labs. And now, when we actually all were part of the computer science department, we all felt that we could actually convince each other, you know, on certain aspects of the lab to make it more appealing to the people that we're going to present it to. And so next we'll have Dave and the team satisfaction overall with the project.
I think I speak for our entire group when I say that we're highly satisfied with the work that was done. According to our textbook, communication satisfaction refers to the positive feeling a group member feels after walking away from a group meeting. And I can say that we definitely felt that sense of satisfaction. Of course, there were meetings where we walked away with a little bit of apprehension on the workload and, as covered earlier, a little bit of uncertainty about what was going on. But nonetheless, all our meetings were very productive, and we also felt very satisfied at the end. I also firmly believe that we satisfied a lot of different aspects of the group satisfaction. We all reached consensus and everyone was satisfied on the decisions made. We were all feeling pleased with our progress throughout the entire course of the project, and we were all free to participate in our own way without fear of judgment or anything like that. I feel that we accomplished our group satisfaction very well. If we were to do anything differently, the only thing would maybe be a little bit more rigorous planning to eliminate that uncertainty that we all felt. And to wrap up, we now have Rachel.
So in retrospect, when reflecting on all the things we did for Millennium Girls, it's definitely very feasible that next semester or next year another group would be able to successfully go and do the Millennium Girls test. However, when considering that, there are probably some advice that people should take into consideration. For example, it is good to understand State Farm and understand that State Farm is a for-profit organization. So in other words, they deal with different things because they're a business, and just because they have money for certain labs doesn't mean that you should go running off and, you know, disposing all the money when trying to consider the labs. They're still a company that's looking to try and save money, but a lot of that money as well is going to be used towards the girls, and there's also a lot of legal obligations. So going into that, again, there's a lot of legal obligations that you're going to want to understand, as long as with like restrictions and things. So you're going to want to have a liaison who's very strong at communicating and unafraid to talk to professionals. But also, do not be afraid to ask as many questions as possible, because they will not be offended if you bombard them with a bunch of emails, but at the same time, try to stay professional and concise with it. Back to like rules and regulations, sometimes they can't always have whatever kind of laptops you want. They have a very specific type of equipment they'll use for labs, or different kinds of materials that might be available and you're able to use, such as you might not want to have things exploding inside the State Farm building, because that's going to be kind of weird and awkward. Sorry to Tyler who wanted to do that. And also, you're going to want to consider that they're not going to want to use things with licenses, so anything that has to do with software, you're going to want to use open source. Or also, with dealing with little girls, they have parents who care about them being on the internet, so you don't want to just encourage all the girls to do whatever they want and sign up for all these things. So in general, don't be afraid. Be proactive, and try to move forward without being hesitant on what you want to do, because they're always going to be there to guide you every step of the way with the board, but at the same time, they're definitely there to hear your creativity. So even though they're a business and this is an organization, don't feel restricted by that. So, in conclusion, we have